Welcome to the Scholastic Spelling Program, authored by Louisa Cook Moats and Barbara Foorman. This program is based on powerful new research on how children learn to spell. It includes built-in phoneme awareness and phonics, a powerful word list, activities to meet individual needs of all students, practice, practice, and practice, integration of spelling to daily reading and writing. It's easy for teachers to teach, fun for students to learn. Before we ask Dr. Moats to tell us more about the program, let's ask students at Elder Creek Elementary School in Sacramento City Unified School District what they think about spelling. Why do you think spelling is important?
So you can learn and grow up to be a good doctor or a teacher.
Because if you grow up and if you don't know how to spell, you don't know how, you are not going to get smarter.
Spelling is good because you can spell a lot and write too.
I need the spelling, to write a story, because if I don't know how to, spell, how can I write a story?
I think spelling is great.
Spelling. What in the world are we doing bringing spelling back into the classroom and bringing spelling books and spelling lessons back into language arts? Well, the fact is, without spelling books and without a spelling program, lots of kids haven't learned how to spell very well, and spelling does count in real life. Parents have been very concerned that their children haven't learned how to spell without the kinds of programs that they had when they were in school. And even though we'd like spelling to teach itself, just with a lot of practice writing, kids haven't learned what they need to know about how to spell words. So for this reason, lots of states, lots of school districts, and lots of individual schools have decided that it's time to bring some spelling instruction back into the classroom. But when I talk to teachers about doing this, often they express to me their fear that spelling will be boring, that it will be a waste of time, that they'll give children practice and a list of words, and then they'll turn around on Monday and misspell all the same words. They'll be afraid that this is just a waste of time. And they also tell me at the root of some of their reservations is their own lack of experience or knowledge about how to teach spelling in an interesting way. So what we've done in Scholastic Spelling is combine the lessons from research in the last 10 or 15 years about how children learn to spell and what makes a good speller and what children learn when they practice spelling, and make a program that's going to be fun to teach, that's going to teach children what's interesting about words, that's going to teach children how to apply what they learn in their writing, and that's going to help the teacher and the kids in the class have a good time while they're doing all of this. Scholastic Spelling integrates findings from research on how children learn to spell and the differences between good and poor spellers. It also is based on what we know about the structure of the English language itself. If you look at the overview in the teacher's manual, we can summarize these lessons from research, beginning with point number 1, which is that phonemic awareness is the underpinning for successful spelling. The first major lesson from research is that good spellers are aware of the individual speech sounds in words. We used to think of spelling as being a rote visual memory kind of process whereby learners would just string letters together in memory and regurgitate them. But now we understand that in order to do that, in order to remember the letters in a word, one must have a clear sense of the individual speech sounds that make that word up. That's why in Scholastic Spelling, we teach children awareness of speech sounds or phoneme awareness in the beginning part of first grade, and all throughout the lessons through third grade, we include some practice listening for speech sounds in every lesson. The second major lesson from research is that good spellers can be taught, or good spellers are made. They aren't just born. Even though many teachers say to me that good spellers are born and not made, and there really isn't any point in teaching spelling because you're either a good speller or a bad speller, the fact is that when children are taught well and they're taught the structure of language in that process, they can learn to spell better. You may not ever change a really poor speller into a spelling bee winner, but you certainly can have an effect on how well children do in general, and you can improve their performance in the process of teaching them how to spell and how to understand the ways in which words are put together. The third major insight from research is that children progress through a series of predictable stages in learning how to spell. In spite of the classroom that they might be placed in, or in spite of the amount of practice that they had at home before coming to school, children tend to go through predictable steps in learning to spell words. I'm going to come back to that and elaborate those ideas with you in a few minutes so that you can understand what's happening with the young spellers in your classrooms. The fourth major lesson from all of these studies on spelling development is that we can predict what is going to be more difficult for children to learn than something else. So for that reason, all throughout this program, I've tried to alert the teacher of any lesson to what is going to be confusing in that lesson and give the teacher some strategies for dealing with those confusions. Usually those confusions have to do with specific elements of language structure, the sounds in words, or the way letters work together to make those words. And I can help you anticipate how to clarify that information for your students. The fifth major lesson from all of these studies about spelling development is that spelling is not just an activity in and of itself that's disconnected from everything else that goes on in language arts. In fact, those children who can spell well typically have a better speaking vocabulary, are typically able to read new words better because they have in their memories a very clear image of what's in a word. When we teach children how to spell, and we do that well, we teach them to look at the details in words, to understand how the sounds are represented by letters, and to understand how words are put together. That is a benefit for all other aspects of word learning. The sixth and last major lesson from research, which we incorporated into this program, is that a good spelling program does encourage children to write. Practice is meaningful when children use these words that they're learning in sentences and creative writing activities that are genuine or authentic and meaningful. And without that practice, memorizing lists of words is really not going to be either interesting or fruitful. So we've put into this program lots of fun activities that can also be vehicles for learning about how to write better and how to use words grammatically and how to manage the components of a sentence better. So there are many other aspects of language learning integrated into these lessons that I think you'll find purposeful and enjoyable to teach. We know that children don't learn to spell just by rote. We're going to look at these stages of spelling development now and look at how when children are learning to spell, they develop concepts of how words are put together, and they gradually elaborate their idea of what is in a word. They also gradually come to grips with the idea that English is an alphabetic writing system, that the letters we use represent the speech sounds in words. Children typically begin to write with letters and letter-like forms at a stage we call the pre-literate stage or pre-conventional stage of spelling development. Let's look at the example in the research paper. Here we have a child who is stringing together some letters, but there isn't any way you can connect what those letters represent to the speech sounds in the words that the child says are represented in this message. The child, when asked to read this back, said, come to the party at 1 o'clock. But there's nothing about the letters in this message that correspond or that represent the sounds in the words. When children are at this stage, they typically use numbers and letters and other invented symbolic forms interchangeably. They may write from left to right or down to up or around in circles. It doesn't matter to them. They also can assign different meanings to these writings without any need to have those letters say the same thing each time that they want to use them. Usually at about age 5, sometime about age 5 in kindergarten, most average children develop the insight that letters represent speech sounds. When that happens, there's usually a sudden qualitative shift in the way the child approaches writing. At this point, which we call the semi-phonetic stage of spelling, children use what they know about letter names and letter forms to try and represent the sounds in words. If you look at the illustration in the research paper, you can see that this child, who in fact was 4 years old and somewhat precocious, wrote the message, "Written by Hannah," illustrated. That's what those words say. You can make out the sounds in the words with the way she uses the letters. What she's done is use her knowledge of letter names to try and represent the sounds in words, and she's very happy representing most of the words, but she doesn't need to represent every sound in the word. Possibly at this point, she is not even aware of all the sounds in a word. Typically, when children are at this level, they can represent whole words with one letter, or what I call the salient consonants, the parts of the words that stand out in speech, and are likely to use capital letters and consonant letters to represent those pieces of the word that they feel in their mouths as they're pronouncing them and that stick out in the sound of the word. At this point, it's unusual for children to represent the vowels in words if they're English-speaking children. It's interesting that Spanish-speaking children, when they're learning to spell, usually write the vowel sounds first and then learn to put the consonants on the word. English-speaking children are different because of the way in which English is structured. If they're progressing well, they then go through what's called the phonetic spelling stage. This is typical of late kindergarten or even early first grade, before children have had a lot of instruction in how the spelling system works. And at this point, their spellings are very systematic and principled. They try to represent each sound in words with letters and letter names. And they do that on a one-to-one correspondence principle, one letter for each sound until they learn otherwise. Beyond that, they use some very interesting strategies for deriving the speech sounds in words. If you look with me at these examples of early phonetic spellings and later phonetic spellings, you can see what's going on in the minds of the children who are generating these spellings from what they know about the alphabet and what they're learning about sounds. They write the long vowels using the vowel letters that have that vowel sound in their name. So that's easy. If you want to write day, you write D-A. If you want to write like, you write L-I-K. If you want to write feel, you write F-E-L if you're a sensible young child. So that's easy enough to figure out. But what do children do when they come across the short vowels? If you think about it, the letter names for the vowels do not have the short vowel sounds in them. So before they learn how to write the short vowels, if they haven't been taught how to do that, how do they go about it? Well, Charles Reed and other researchers showed in the early 70s that they use a very clever strategy. If children want to write the short vowel in the word fish or the word will, the short vowel I, what they do is pull out the letter name that feels almost the same in the mouth or that shares a place of articulation. So they'll write fish, I, E. The letter name that they use to write I is E because it feels almost the same in articulation. That's why you see the F-E-S for fish or the W-E-L for will. The same principle applies for the sound E in bed or the sound E in said. When the child's writing, they go said, S, E, A. And they use the letter name A because it feels almost the same in the mouth. This principle follows as well for the in cut and much, for the in got and clock. If you say and then say a letter name that's in the same position, I is the one that's paired with the sound. Children do other very interesting and creative things with letters to represent sounds. For example, if they want to spell the W in watch, what letter name has a W in it? Y. So you'll see them writing a word like will, Y-L, or watch, Y-O-H. And where does that H come from? The only letter name that has ch in it is H. Children are very clever at this stage. So how do kids get to real spelling from inventive or phonetic spelling? There's an awful lot to learn, and they aren't going to learn it just by inventing spellings on the basis of speech sounds all the way through school. They have to learn a lot of other stuff, like which letters do you really use for the sounds? What details about the sounds do we not spell? How do we use letter combinations to represent syllables and meaningful parts of words? How do we connect those meaningful parts in spelling? When children progress through a spelling program, those are the sorts of things they need to learn through direct teaching, because invention and practice seeing words in print is not enough for them to internalize all of those details about words. Only the very best spellers can do that just from exposure.
If you don't know how to spell a word, what do you do?
I just try to sound it out. When I'm in school, I sound it out. Or sometimes when I'm at home, I ask my dad how you spell that thing. Sometimes he doesn't know.
Sometimes, if my dad is at home, I ask my dad. And if I can, I ask my mom. And if I can't either, I go to the dictionary and like to try to sound it out first.
Ask me a hard word, then I cut them in pieces like half, then I spell them all right by helping you sounding out and helping you how to write it 20 times each. If it's a long word or it's like too hard for me to sound it, I use a dictionary. Practice writing it 20 times.
What we've learned from watching children go through the phonetic spelling stage is that they have to go through it in order to be good spellers, in order to benefit from these wonderful lessons we've designed. They have shown us that detecting the speech sounds in words is a vital prerequisite skill for learning to spell. Therefore, We as teachers need to be in tune with what those children are doing. We also need to help the children who are not aware of the speech sounds become aware of the speech sounds. That's why I think every teacher who is a good teacher of spelling will know what the speech sounds are. And interestingly enough, from all the work I've done with teachers, I've found it to be very common, almost universal, that we don't know what the speech sounds are unless someone has taught that to us. It's not knowledge that we go around with every day. If I said, what are all the vowels in English? I don't think you could tell me right off the bat. But that's okay. This is learnable stuff. So what we're going to do is go through the vowels and the consonants of English. This isn't hard. It may seem a little odd at first to think about sounds like this, but I can guarantee you it will be a great help when you're teaching Scholastic Spelling to refer back to these consonant and vowel charts as you're working with children who are trying to figure out about the sounds and the symbols that represent them in words. So we're going to start with the vowels. How many vowels are there in English? The standard answer I get is A, E, I, O, or U. But you know what? Those are letters. Those aren't the vowel sounds. The vowel sounds include sounds like and and oi, and so forth. Vowels are a class of speech sounds. They're that part of the syllable that we sing, if we can sing. They are the necessary speech sound in every syllable. You can't have a syllable without a vowel. Have you ever tried to talk without saying vowels? You can't do it. The vowels are arranged or are different from one another because of the place of the mouth as the vowel is spoken. So I want you to watch me, and I'm going to go through the vowels in sequence from a high smiley vowel all the way around to a different mouth position, and say these in order. E, I, A, I, O, oo. I started with my mouth smiley, E. I ended up with my mouth rounded and sort of closed to say oo. In the middle, I got down to the ah position, and my jaw opened up much wider than it did for E or oo. And just think about it. If someone wants to look in your throat, they're going to ask you to say ah. They're not going to say E or say oo, because they won't be able to look in there. So ah is the vowel where your jaw is the lowest and your throat is the most open. Now I'm going to say this one more time, but this time look at the vowels on the chart. E, I, A, I, O, and oo. Now you try to say it. Let's do it one more time. E, I, A, I, O, oo. Now you'll notice that there are two vowels that didn't make it onto that vowel circle. They're down in the left-hand corner of the chart. Those are called the diphthongs. The diphthongs are vowels that slide in the middle. Your mouth changes position in the middle of the vowel. So oi and ow are two diphthongs in English. Sometimes linguists also say that I is a diphthong, but because it fit better on the vowel chart, I put it next to the other vowels up on the vowel circle. So we have all of the ones on the vowel circle, the diphthongs oi and ow. The schwa that floats in the middle, that's what the indistinct vowel is. A schwa happens in an unaccented syllable. The schwa doesn't have any clear identity. It's just a push of breath the beginning of alone, or the first vowel in believe, or the second vowel in definition. Those are all schwas. And finally, there are the R-controlled vowels, the ones that are on the right-hand corner of the vowel chart. There are 3 spellings for the sound and also the sound R and OR. Each have a standard spelling. Those sounds sometimes are classified as separate vowels. I like to talk about them as R-controlled vowels, but mainly what you need to remember is that any time an R follows a vowel, it changes the quality of that vowel. So you have to be careful working with children not to mix up R-controlled vowels with the other ones. Words are made up not only of vowels, obviously, but also of consonants. What's a consonant? A consonant is a sound that's not a vowel, and it's a closed sound. You have to close your mouth around this air that comes out in order to make a consonant. Consonants share features with one another that makes them more or less confusable. And this will be obvious if you look at the chart. This chart is very useful both for understanding the errors that children make and also for figuring out how to clear up for children what might be confusing to them. So all throughout Scholastic Spelling, a lot of the tips that I give to the teacher have to do with the consonants in this chart and which ones are similar to others. The information in the consonant chart will be useful to you because it will help you understand why children make errors and what they're confusing, and it will also help you figure out what kind of corrective feedback to give to children who are confusing similar sounds. The stop consonants on the top row are paired into 3 pairs. The first ones are made in the front of the mouth. If you say p, your lips come together. But you don't say, I wouldn't want you to say pa. Don't put a vowel on that sound. Say it quiet, p, just with a push of breath. And then, if you add voicing or add your vocal cords, say b, p, b. One is quiet or voiceless, p, and one has voicing, b. The same thing happens when you move back in the mouth and you start with t. Your tongue is behind your teeth. The sound is quiet, t. The sound is not t. If you add voicing to t, you get d. Another way to hear the voicing is to put your hands over your ears and then say the voiced sound d, and you'll hear the resonance in your head. If you go further back in the mouth and bring your tongue up behind the back of your throat, you can make the voiceless sound or the quiet sound k. Not ka, but k. If you add voicing to that, you get g. But the main thing to realize is that your mouth is doing the same thing except for the voicing with those 3 pairs of sounds. As it turns out, lots of the confusions that children experience have to do with that feature called voicing. On the next line, you see 3 sounds we call nasal sounds. What's important about these? Well, the air goes through our noses when we say them. So if we say feel your nose, put your fingers on your nose and try and say It's hard to do because if you hold your nose, you're blocking the air and you really can't say it very well. That's why we call these nasal sounds. And a third one, which is hard to show because my tongue is in the back of my mouth, and it's the same sound that you hear on the end of sing, or that is in the word sink. Sink is spelled S-I-N-K, but the sounds in sink are s, I, and k. The fricatives are the hissy sounds. They again are paired with the voiceless ones on the top. So we have f and v as a pair, th and th as a pair, s and z, and sh and zh. The zh sound is in the middle of some words in English like treasure and measure, but it doesn't ever occur at the beginnings of words. The affricates are ch and j. Again, the mouth is doing the same thing except for the voicing. So if we're teaching a lesson on ch, we want to be sure the children don't confuse that sound ch with j. Some children may need a lot of practice clearing up which is which. The glides are y, w, and h, and also the voiceless wh that we spell with wh. The liquids are ul and Now let's look at the Scholastic Spelling lesson format. The good thing about this is you can really get into a routine once you know what to expect, and your children will also be comfortable with the routine. Within that routine is novelty and a lot of interesting activities. In the teacher manual, you'll see an example of the lesson layout for the entire week. On 2 pages before every lesson is a layout of the objectives for each day, a list of the sentences you'll use to give a pre-test to children, and the sentences that you'll use to give a post-test or a final test to children. In every lesson, we've organized the word lists around several principles. First of all, we want to show the patterns in the language, so the basic word list is made up of words that follow a regular pattern in English. By the way, almost 80% to 90% of the words in English can be spelled by pattern or rule. Second, we've put into every lesson some tips for meeting individual needs of students. We have extension activities for those who need extra help, and we have enrichment activities for those who may be more able or gifted at spelling and who need a greater challenge. We have room on the word list for children to write their own words, especially from grade 2 on up. We also include in every list some of the sight words that children just have to remember through lots of practice. I've tried to give you some suggestions about what errors children make with these words and how to clear them up. And our ESL consultant put into every lesson some very useful suggestions about Spanish learners and children who speak other languages. Every lesson has more information about language in it than just how to spell the words. So you'll see in the extension activities, work on plural forms, work on vocabulary, work on grammatical usage, work on idioms, and many other interesting aspects of language that have to do with words and their proper use. On day 3 of every week is a writing activity. We've tried to make those interesting and fun, and to give children some leeway or creativity in what they produce. Aligned with that writing activity is a proofreading activity. That proofreading activity is designed from the beginning to get children in the habit of looking carefully at what they've written and finding mistakes. In conjunction with proofreading, we teach children a set of symbols that they can use to mark their paper or someone else's that are typically used by editors in the publishing business. Why not learn these from the beginning? So let's look at a sample lesson. I've chosen the grade 2, lesson 5, lesson on short O, and you can find it in the grade 2 teacher's manual on page 24A and 24B. And you'll see that the word list is organized around the spelling to sound relationship ah is spelled with a short O. Looking at the word list as it's presented to children on page 24, you'll see that your knowledge of the vowel chart will be useful. If we have children read and say these words before they spell them, we might find some differences in pronunciation. The word list is on, odd, lot, spot, stop, rock, socks, box, fox, and off. We know from differences in speech production that some children will say on as on, and some will say it as on, more like off. Some children will say off, more like odd, and so forth. The teacher might refer back to the vowel chart and show children that ah and aw are very close to each other in pronunciation, and we don't all say these vowels exactly the same. Nevertheless, the letter O can stand for both of those variations. Here are a few final suggestions for using Scholastic Spelling well. Number one, be sure to start your lessons with these listening activities we've designed. We know that listening carefully to words helps children be better spellers. Secondly, try to get children to look for the common pattern in the words, to do the word sorting activities. Third, get them to say the words, speak the sounds, talk about the words. Spelling instruction does not have to be silent. Fourth, get them to use these words in their writing. One technique that teachers have used is to have little bookmarks with personal word lists on them or standard word lists that children are responsible for using in their own writing that they can refer back to and they can develop as the weeks go on. And last, I would say teach this with thoughtfulness. Teach children the concepts about words. Teach them where words come from. Teach them why words are interesting. Teach them the connections among words. And if you do that, you're going to have children who learn to love language. So teaching spelling doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be rote. It can be interesting. It can be lively. It can even be the best part of your day. What you have to do is get kids to listen to these words, to talk about them, to sort them out, to compare them, to look at how they're connected to other words, think about where they came from, why they're spelled the way they are. You can turn kids on to spelling, because after all, spelling does matter.
How would you teach me how to spell?
I'll teach you. I get a teaching book and teach you. First, I tell them the meaning, right? And let them say the word first. And when they know the meaning, they know the word, then I show them how to spell it. I will make them write it on a piece of paper about 5 times and give them a quiz on it, see if they know how to spell it. So I will do that. First I give them an easy letter, right? And then a bonus letter, a little bit longer. Okay, a first word is a short one is cat, like that. And a hard word class. See? It will make them have more fun. And if they got it right, maybe I would give them candies or stickers to make them have fun. And make them laugh and that kind of stuff.